Ladies and gentlemen, this is Stevie J from AngryMarks.com with your Bellator 92 recap, and I have to say, honestly, this was one of the most tedious Bellator shows in a long time. Without further ado, before I drag this video on forever, let's discuss these fights, shall we? Popo Bazeha won the first round with takedowns and submission attempts, and then Mike Rickman wisely realized he didn't want to stay in that spot with him and kept it on the feet and did his best to outstrike him. And he was able to get a judge's decision that way. So, the right decision on his part. It was not, however, unanimous for the Marine, as he got two 29-28s and a 28-29. Feels like every decision goes to a split decision these days, doesn't it? Between Bellator and UFC, that's all you ever seem to see. It's getting hard as hell to get judges to actually agree on what they watch. Our second fight almost went the distance, Dan Kramer and Britt Cooper, and Cooper was actually getting beaten pretty badly until he made a comeback in the third round. And I don't mean badly as in beaten up, I mean badly as in stuck on the fence and taken down, and then they'd get stood up and he'd get taken down again. But finally, he just started swinging for the fences in round 3, probably because he knew he was down 2 rounds already. And sometimes when you do that, it actually works out. And for Britt Cooper, it was definitely the right idea, because he got a big knockout here. An uppercut and a right hand forced Herb Dean to stop the fight at 3:19 in the third round. So in a fight he was losing, with just about a minute and a half left to go, he pulled it out. Now a fight that I'm pretty well perplexed of the scoring by is Sultan Aliyev versus Doug the Rhino Marshall. Don't get me wrong, I actually like Marshall the better of these two fighters. He's more charismatic, he's more fun to watch, he likes to go for big finishes, and he was a hometown guy, and the crowd was really into it, but he was not winning this fight. Aliyev was taking him down, controlling him, putting him on the fence, not letting him do much of anything. Maybe Marshall won the second round because Aliyev was unable to take him down, and Marshall did tag him a couple of times, but Aliyev was staying on his bicycle and trying to avoid getting hit, and Jimmy Smith even noted on commentary that it's pretty hard to knock out a guy who's always moving backwards, and that was the story of this fight. Was Aliyev was doing a very good job of avoiding getting hit, and then he would get a takedown, not much would happen, they'd get back to their feet, and then he would avoid getting hit. But somehow, and I really don't know how, because I didn't feel like Marshall did a whole lot. Again, maybe you could give him the second round, but somehow he pulls off the split decision here. If it tells you anything, one judge gave Aliyev a 30-27, and the other two gave 29-28s to Doug Marshall. So one judge clearly believes Aliyev won the whole fight, and of the 3 scores, I actually think that was the more appropriate score. Doug Marshall didn't seem to believe he'd won the fight. He was so shocked he ran and jumped up to the top of the fence to celebrate, and Jimmy Smith had to spend like 30 seconds corralling him back to the center of the cage for an interview. Anyway, we move on to the final fight, and keep in mind, they just padded the living shit out of this thing. So our main event started with like 5 minutes to go before the top of the hour and ran over. And the reason it ran over is because Frodo Hasbulayev took a nasty shot to the groin from Marlon Sandro. I mean, he was crying, groaning, whimpering. This poor fool was just in all kinds of hurt. And you know, they weren't going to stop the fight. Big John was giving him more time to recover and more time to recover, and even told his corner to translate for him that they were going to give him more time to recover. He got at least the 5 minutes, if not more. And finally, the fight continued. Marlon Sandro was getting old before our eyes in this fight. He looked pretty old in his last fight, which he won kind of on a miracle, you know, scoring-wise, and this time he didn't manage to survive that. I mean, he had his moments. He was going for submissions. He was getting out of submissions, but Hasbulayev was attempting way more stuff. I mean, Frodo was going for everything. He was going arm bars, omoplatas, straight arm bars. He would spin around and take his back like there was nothing to it. It was an amazing display. I was really impressed by Hasbulayev in this fight. I think it's the best he's ever looked. And then in the third round, Sandro was so exhausted from defending all this, he could barely even get up off his stool, and John McCarthy had to come over and check to see if he was really ready to go. He's like, "Are you ready, baby?" And Sandro said yes. His body said no. And you could tell with a couple minutes gone in this fight that his spirit was gone too. Sandro ended up on the ground again, and he started getting pounded on really badly. And John told him, fight back. I got to see something. And he just kept eating shots, and finally he was saved by TKO. The official time was 2:38 of the third round. When there's only 4 fights and it takes 2.5 hours to get through them all, it just feels like forever. It's not going to be my favorite Bellator show ever. Stevie J from AngryMarks.com.